Welcome to the Relatable Debatable podcast. Welcome to the podcast where we talk about all things that are debatably relatable, whether it's dating, your family, your relationship with your dad, corporate life, getting a job, pursuing your passions, basically anything that's potentially relatable, but that's debatable. Today I have a Clerman.
Yes.
Clerman.
Yes.
Did it right.
You did.
A friend of mine, comedian and HR recruiting professional. We're going to talk today about the concept of job hopping. The reason this came about is a lot of my friends, family, former coworkers call me out a lot because I'm the queen of changing jobs every year and 3 months. And I figured, why not bring in a professional who's seen it a lot, exposed to it a lot, and we can talk about it. I have reasons why I think it's worthy, but I do have a newer perspective now that I've gotten older on how to approach it. But I'm definitely curious to hear about you. But with that, tell everybody about yourself, your background, who you are, and...
You got it. Well, Julie, thanks so much for having me.
Of course.
It's so much fun. I like how comedy brings us together.
I know.
So many different ways. So a little bit about me. My name is Adee Clerman. I live in New York right now. I'm originally from Cincinnati, Ohio.
Midtown or Midwest girl.
Yes, very much a Midwest girl. Grew up in Cincinnati and then went to undergrad in a small school in Wisconsin called Beloit College. And then after college, like all Midwestern people do, moved to the big city of Chicago,
Yep,
Bright Lights, big
home.
city. Yep. And I was in Chicago for about 13 years, started my career there. I started my career as a recruiter, and I did a lot of early to mid talent recruiting in a few different industries, but the main ones were financial services, public relations, and higher ed.
Broad background.
Yeah, broad background, but all like in recruiting.
Yeah.
And then I transitioned over to higher ed career services. So that means like if you're in university, if you want to get your resume done, you want to do a mock interview, you want to talk about any sort of professionalism, you come to like a professional building workshop, myself and my team would do those for the university. It was a lot of fun. I really enjoyed it, but I wanted to get back into a faster paced work environment. But anyway, I was in Chicago for like 13 years, moved to New York in 2017. Here in New York, I worked in career services at NYU and Columbia, and then wanted to get back into a faster paced corporate environment. And let's be honest, want to make a little bit more money.
Of course.
So like hopped my job and transitioned over to transitioned over to corporate, and I worked at Gallagher, which is an insurance brokerage firm, in an HR recruitment role for about 3.5 years, and then I actually just started a new role in December at National Grid, which is a power company.
Okay.
And now I'm doing solely training and learning and development. And so once we hire the people, my team and I, it's our job to like wrap our arms around them, keep them, develop them, make them feel like comfortable and good in their role, and help develop people to be the best professionals they can be. So I have a nice background in recruitment, professional development, and I love talking about all things professional, jobs, job hopping. I think we spend so much time at our jobs, at our day jobs. It's part of our identity. It builds a big base for us emotionally, financially, and I always want people to be as happy and successful in that realm because it really affects everything else.
Literally.
Yeah.
Everything.
So I'm like very excited to talk to you about this topic today.
So couple initial questions. Did you know you wanted to work in HR and recruiting when you were in college?
No, absolutely not. I was a psych and Spanish major, double major, and I just knew that probably much like you naturally gravitated towards people. You were good with people. You probably had a lot of fun.
Yeah.
People like ya. And no, I just liked sort of a people-centric major. I liked languages. And then in terms of falling into HR, after graduation, I didn't know what I was going to do. And so I waitressed for almost a year in Evanston.
Okay. Where?
At the Blind Faith Cafe.
Okay.
Vegetarian, vegan restaurant. I eat meat, but friends from college were working there. It was great. This was 2004, so this is a long time ago. But I waitressed for a year, and then through networking and a connection through my mom, I found a job at JP Morgan and started as an HR coordinator and then just kind of fell into HR that way. And I find that story to be so common among HR professionals. Like, they're like, oh, yeah, I didn't know. I just like people. And then this job came up or that job came up or I did this internship or somebody, I temped for somebody. So the 20-minute, long story long.
Yeah.
No, I didn't know.
It's funny because, like, I will say this. I did always know I wanted to work in advertising.
Nice.
Even down to, so we did these time capsules in high school.
Yeah.
Where you put, like, where do you see yourself in 10 years? Da, da, da. I said I was going to own my own ad agency.
Yeah. I
was also going to do events at a hotel.
Yeah.
And hold on, you're going to die at this. I will also be the CEO of Procter & Gamble.
Oh, hey, Cincinnati. All right. There you go.
And then you get to put your salary down. And I said, what do I think I was going to make? I said $99,000.
As the CEO of P&G,
As CEO of P&G,
they would hire you right now. They'd be like, oh, this girl is so good at budgeting. Wow.
CEO of P&G, owner of an agency, and then events at a hotel. I'm like, your perception of money in high school is so different. But I feel like anybody I talk to, especially in like the agency world and things, a lot of people ad agency wise didn't know that they were going to work in advertising. It was just one of those, it was a lot of like, oh, I met this person, I did this internship, so and so. But I also feel like that's kind of the name of the game, right? A lot of, if I learned anything from a business owner in the town I grew up, he was like, have the best time in college. Yeah. Everything you learn there is useless. Meet as many people as possible. Yeah. Because the people that and form relationships with them, because you don't know where they're going to be. And you never know when they will, especially if you have a friendship or rapport with them, you never know like when your worlds will collide.
It's totally true. I think networking is such a bad word. Like, people don't like it. It feels weird. It feels very forced. But networking is really just like meeting people authentically and having a nice time. Like, you and I met at a comedy show. Yep. And then just liked each other and kept in touch, and here we are. Yeah. But it's so funny, going back to what you said about what you wanted to do about being in like a CEO of like a brand, or do like a large, essentially branding house, or
literally the largest,
or being in advertising or being in events. There are still commonalities there. Like,
that's 100%.
People oriented, logistics, like management. So I think all those, even though they all sound different, I think they all play to your strengths.
Oh, 100%. Even like, so, because we do comedy, and I started producing shows, and I was like, oh my God, I'm like a little bit career-gasming, because producing a show, one, I get to like flex my creative muscles in like advertising it, because I know how to do that. Yeah. I also get to, just like I love event planning, a show is essentially event planning. Yeah. And then like documenting it, posting it, and like I feel like the comedy world blends into all the things that I like to do. Like, I love public speaking, I love being on panels, I love advertising's creative. Yeah. Comedy allows us to be creative.
Totally.
But
it's a business like any other, and it's so logistics heavy. Like, Darren, obviously, who I just love her. But I remember telling her, because you see her in action, like on the day of a show, and she's like, you're here, you're here, you're here. And I remember within like, I think the first 2 or 3 times I met her, I told her, I was like, I just want to let you know you're really good at your job. Like, you're very polite, but you're very efficient. You keep the trains running on time. Yep. And yes, it's a creative outlet, but like, it's a business like any other.
100%.
It was so I can see why you're career-gasming all over the place, putting on shows, and I bet you're quite good at it.
Sold out every one.
Yeah, so I'll happily be a guest in one the next time you have one.
I'm not gonna lie though, and a lot of people gave me shit because I decided, because I don't ever want to do anything easily. I decided to do brunch show.
Oh yeah, but with the pets. And I was so mad I couldn't come.
That was the November one, yeah. But before that, it was just like a brunch show, so a 1:00 show. And people, like, I have comics being like, you're not even gonna get 10 people in there. No, I'm like, first of all, on tap market, because I think people in our age range love a midday activity. It's an untapped market, if you ask me, because instead of just going to brunch or just drinking or what have you, it's like you're gonna laugh, you're gonna have a good time. If you want to have drinks, you can have drinks. If you want a snack, have a snack. But you could also be home at a normal hour. No one wants to be up that late anymore.
Yes.
And who doesn't love brunch?
I would have been there. I was just in Chicago. Otherwise, I would have been. I think we talked about it. But I'm so glad that you found that outlet, and you're clearly quite good at it. So kudos to you.
Yeah, but maintaining it, we'll see. It'll be interesting.
Yeah.
But what's interesting is you talk about how like there's themes in everything that I've done. I'll tell you this. I started out in sales.
I can see that.
And I was quite good.
Yeah.
But
meet those quotas, girl.
I did. There was even a company I moved to in Arizona that in my first month, I think I'd like booked a meeting a day, and I think I'd closed 3 deals in my first month, which most people takes like 3 months to get there. But I was like, wait, you're going to pay me trash, but I get what if I sell? Like, because that's their whole incentive. Yeah. But I've been in sales. Then I was like more on like program management, project management, which is more of like my event flexing skills. And then I'm not going to lie, I lied in an interview because I lied in an interview thinking I needed to get the job. Okay. So I've always wanted to go into advertising. Yeah. I was on the sales side, and I got into ad sales, but then it was an account manager role where when I read the job description, it talked about like Excel skills, numbers, analysis, in addition to managing partnerships, this, that, and what have you. And at the end of my interview, they asked me, would I prefer to work with numbers and performance? Or do I want to be more like presenting and presentations? And I was like, oh shit, like the entire job description was all about like performance numbers, this, that. Yeah. So I said the numbers. By the way, I didn't know shit about Excel. Nothing. But I'm queen of faking it till you make it. Queen of it.
That's a life lesson. That's a total life lesson.
But I find out after the fact they were looking to hire 2 people. Yeah. And they wanted one person they're like, oh, if you want to be with numbers, we'll put you with the numbers. And then the other person got to do, and it was on Hulu, and this is before Hulu was big. This is when they're trying to compete with Netflix.
Interesting.
And so there was the side of you get to promote the shows, like the Mindy Project and all of that, which I would have loved. Or I get to like drive subscriptions, which was not the sexiest thing in the world. Yeah. But now I wouldn't say I wouldn't lie in an interview, but like I'm now more like conscious of what I'm saying because it could tip the scales in any other direction. Yeah. But truthfully, like I was there. It was a contract role.
Oh, okay.
So that I always find like reasons to jump, if that makes sense. Or and because I'm not gonna lie, contract roles and like seeing other parts of the business like being lost and meaning you'd be out of a job, I was like, oh, I want like safety. So then I went to a company that I could get full time. Yeah. And then it was a big agency, smaller, where they do creative media, everything. Yeah. Jumped there. Then I was like, oh, I hated my boss. And I was like, I want to move to New York. I want to pursue comedy.
All right.
Moved to New York. At a company for 8 months. Wasn't a good fit because they were a smaller agency. Then I jumped to another. But I'm doing something different in every role. So I didn't just stay an analyst.
Nice.
Then I went to like more of the strategy. Then I went to non-media related things. So I like to say, and I think that's partially why I've gotten to where I am in my career, I allowed myself the depth and breadth. I didn't just like jump to do the same thing somewhere else. And I wouldn't do that. Because if I jump to do the same thing everywhere else, it's the same shit, different toilet. It doesn't matter where you work. I can confidently say that. Like it does. If I was at a Procter & Gamble or a Unilever, I can, with so much confidence, say it's probably the same, right? Like in the sense of like the work. Like if you are doing, let's just say, HR or media strategy, like the the tasks and the roles for the most part are the same. The people are different.
Yeah.
People are always different. So I always justified I was jumping because I was learning a new skill set.
Yeah.
It challenged me.
Sure.
And it like put me out of my comfort zone a lot of times.
Yeah.
But after I jumped one company, I started getting really good at getting engraved in the culture immediately.
Sure.
Which is, I think, what a lot of people have a hard time with. But I'm not going to lie. There have been interviews where people are like, you don't look like you can hold down a job.
Stable lady on
Stable.
paper.
I don't look like a stable person on paper, and I don't. I don't look like a stable person on paper, and anytime I've applied for jobs blindly, I very rarely got a call or reached out to, unless it was a smaller company. But I may have not been reached out to blindly, but anytime I saw something, I had met so many people at that point, I could just reach out.
Yeah.
But I'm curious with your background and everything you've been exposed to, especially working in colleges and non-colleges, your take on job hopping, when to do it, when not to do it.
Sure. So I think, well, everybody's career path, I think you touched on like a few different aspects of like career and thought in
ADD
that.
in real form right now.
No, it's all right because jobs bring up a lot of stuff. From a job hopping, like purely from a job hopping perspective, there are a couple things. Like it like depends on how you define job hopping. I think from a red flag standpoint, it gets from a former recruiter, where it gets a little dicey is like 3 months, 4 months, a year, like can't hold anything for like a year or less. Because then it's almost like, and then references tend to be a little quieter or like a little harder, a little bit further. It's never a manager. It's always like a colleague or a friend or something. I don't think that there's anything wrong per se with job hopping or transitioning jobs, etc. There are a couple ways. So a couple things where from a recruitment standpoint, and this is just my own opinion,
of course,
where it can be a detriment is if it's consistently like under a year. It's consistently in the month standpoint, and it is consistently, and this might be my bias, but like if it's only companies that don't have a name brand, it's only a startup, it's only your friend's thing, it's only something with your last name where you're working for your dad or whatever it is, where it's not as like quote, it's not like the companies you're working for aren't as established as one would hope. Yeah. Right? Because there is something about the power of you're in branding. Name brands are sexy. They lend credibility, all that. So I think like where it gets a little dicey is if there isn't a lot of like, if there isn't any sort of brand on your resume, and if it's all under a year. And if you're in college and you're listening to this, like internships are great. That's different. That's not job hopping. That's just like 3 months, 6 months, whatever. But if this is like a consistent pattern for like, if you've been in the workforce for like 5 years, 6 years, you know, less than, like up to 7, I would say, and it's all months and months and months, new job, that can be a little dicey. Where I think job hopping is good is one, you've kind of maxed out your skill set. So you're just like not learning anything. You could do this job in your sleep. Sometimes doing your job in your sleep is great if you want it to be stable and to focus on other things. Exactly. It just depends on like how you want to utilize how you're spending your time at your job, right? But I think one, if you've maxed out your skill set and you're just like bored out of your mind and you're like, I'm a young professional who wants to keep growing, it's a good time to job hop. 2, if you're just stagnant in your salary. That's a huge one because hiring budgets, and I'll say this loudly for the people in the back, hiring budgets are always higher than like retention budgets. I'm not saying that you should job hop every year or every 18 months for like just to get a higher salary. But if you've been in a role for 2, 3, 4 years and you're doing great work and you're consistently getting good reviews, but they're only giving you a 2 or 3% raise, you need to look at your industry. You need to look at other companies, and that's a good time to get out because you're not going to get those big bumps.
No.
By staying.
Nope.
For me, in my career path, typically the longest I've ever been in a role is like just under 5 years. It's been about 4.5, almost 5.
I wish.
My last role, I was in the role for about 3 years. And then this new role, I'm hoping to be at least in this company for like 5, 10. I'm really enjoying it. And there's also they've proven throughout the interview process that there's a lot of movement internally and within the department. So like the woman whose job I took over, she was on maternity leave, but she's coming back into a new role. Yep. And I was like, whoa, she's coming back because she likes it, but she had the opportunity to stretch and try something new, which was really exciting for me. So I think from a job hopping standpoint, to do it well and to maximize it for you, because at the end of the day, it's all about you. You want to make sure that you are learning, growing. Think about why you want to job hop. If you continually job hop because you hate your boss at every job, that's a deeper introspection conversation. Sometimes.
I'll argue with you on that.
Relatable, debatable.
Yeah.
If everywhere you go, you are finding there's friction and you're leaving because you hate these people, that might be I have to be an entrepreneur because I want things to be my way. Or it could be other things. But I would when you're thinking about leaving a role, I would consider all of the reasoning behind it. I think another reason to transition is to keep, if you've atrophied, your skill set has atrophied and you want to learn new things, do that. From a financial perspective, make a jump, but I wouldn't make the financial jumps every 30 seconds because that's great. It can it can bump your salary up pretty quickly. But then you might hit a plateau of you'll jump, but it'll be a lateral move.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
I have experienced that.
Yeah.
So I'm curious your take on this. I think there are not a lot of great managers out there, and people are often not trained to be managers.
Absolutely.
Because a lot of times people who get promoted to be managers and manage people is because they're good at their job.
Yeah.
And it rarely actually has to do with if they're good at managing people.
You're exactly right.
And that's why I was I'm only saying this because I would say all of my 20, well, that's not completely fair. Majority of my 20s, I had the worst bosses.
For certain.
And also when I'm especially at a certain age, if my boss is 26 and I'm 24 and they're going out and partying and coming in hungover and not doing shit and not pushing things forward, listening to me or there's the human element to management is not innate. And I always had this theory that it shouldn't be your best person. Your best individual contributor should actually not be a people manager.
Yeah.
Because oftentimes whoever's the best at their craft is not always good with people and training. It depends.
You're exactly right. And this is something you find across industry.
100%.
Management is a skill that you learn.
Yep.
That you have to be. There are so many trainings for it. There are so many it's not just something that you're born with, right? And so when you're saying that, I think you are 100% correct of oh yeah, this was just the next step in their career was management, but they're terrible with people. And they don't know how to encourage. They don't know how to go to be a coach. They don't know how to go from player to coach. So a lot of times when people have bad managers, it's because the manager doesn't know how to manage because that's a skill in itself. They were just tossed into it. So you're right. If there tends to be a lot of friction with management, Yes, I would say that there are probably way more bad bosses than good bosses.
Exactly. I think it's the number one reason people leave jobs.
Absolutely. But also, nobody talks about a great boss because they just are having a good time at their job. But everybody loves a bad boss story. Everybody loves a takedown. Everybody loves, and then I took him to HR. Everybody watches that stuff on like TikTok. Well, not after Sunday, but like of like, this bad boss like texted, like sent a WhatsApp and said that they weren't going to do this, and then the worker like said something very professional and then took them to HR, and that boss got shot down. Right? We love that because that feels really good to see when like the big bad person gets taken down. But all of this is to say, from job hopping because your boss is horrendous, is a.
But you should still have other people to speak to on your behalf. And my advice also, if your boss is super horrendous, skip levels are not like skip levels, meaning like your boss's boss. Try to like, I'm not saying throw your boss under the bus, because I will say I had given feedback on a boss of mine to the head of the company, because that was the type of confidence I had in my 20s. Is I just went straight to the head of the company, and I was like, I want to meet with you quarterly. And they were like, oh, okay, like, sure. And of course they have to say yes, because that's, especially people in that role, a lot of what they do is just be therapists, untrained. But don't go behind your boss. You always try to find a way to be for, like, it. I feel like a lot of tension with bosses is because you're also not willing to communicate with them, or you're not comfortable to say it, or you don't know how to say it, or the way you say it isn't the right way.
Yeah.
But if you're at least, my trail is like, try and provide the feedback, talk about it, but then also get to a place of, if you can form a relationship with another senior person or somebody who can mentor you, but you like, because you like the company you're in, you like what you're doing, and it's just the boss thing. Yep. There are ways to get around, like, don't spend a lot of time with your boss. But if everybody else loves you, and it's, or not loves you, but like respects what you're doing, there's no way they can truly bring you down. Well, I don't know. I think depends on the company.
It depends on the company, and I think a couple suggestions. This is a nice pivot, and it goes into job hopping, but a couple suggestions about how to navigate a bad boss. And I've had a bunch. A couple jobs ago, I ended up leaving. I had a boss who was just, she had a lot of problems, but she was also like, she had actively come out and said that she was like jealous of me. Yep. It was sabotaging my career, all this stuff, which sounds quite dramatic. But what I would recommend when you do have a bad boss that is truly not just kind of like annoying, but like a truly bad boss that's hindering you, one, document everything. And when I'm talking about document everything, I kept a separate, just like a Microsoft Notes page of like, here's the date, here's what they said, here's what I did, copy paste the email. I would email it to myself so I'd have like a running record of it. So just so you have a nice documentation, because when we tell these stories about our bad bosses, they can all get like muddled and emotional. And she said and this and like, so just write it down. If they say something that's like a little, ooh, that didn't feel right, write it down and then put it away. Two, if you have a bad boss, to your point, don't engage with them as much. Typically, bad bosses often, like,
they don't want to engage with you either. They're usually stressed out. There's usually underlying reasons. They probably have too much on their plate, and they don't know how to also deal with the people part.
Yeah, and also they have, like, they're people like everybody else, but they also, like, sometimes they like a power struggle. Yeah. They feel like they're not capable of their role. So engage less, but also they want to be in, like, seen as powerful and authoritative. So in that case, with the boss that I did not particularly care for, I disengage with her. I document everything. But then she was also like a very heavy micromanager.
I hate.
So, and who wanted to feel like very in control and powerful. So what I would do, and it's disingenuous, but it kept the peace. I would do whatever task it was, or I'd complete my project, and then I would go to her and say, hey, on one specific piece that didn't matter, I'd go to her and say, hey, I'd love your guidance around this X, Y, and Z piece. I know you're quite good at this because of this credential you have. So basically like kissing her ass.
Yeah.
Can you walk me through this? Because it made her feel like I was going to her as an authority figure and I was going to her as a subject matter expert. She liked that hit of dopamine. Yep. She felt that I was
100%.
Seeing her as a leader. And I already knew that work was really good, but it made her feel nice and it also kept me off my back. And like maybe she'd give me some feedback that I didn't know about this small piece that was inconsequential. But so I'd recommend seeing if you can disengage, but find a way to like engage them in a way that makes them feel good and important.
Always at least compliments or even
but like not maliciously.
No.
But like just like, hey, okay, I recognize that this person may be feeling like they're not in control, so I'm going to give them some control in a way that is helpful, and it'll help like buffer our relationship. It'll give us some face time, but it's about something that isn't going to really like affect me emotionally. And then 3, I would just like start updating my resume.
Yep.
Start networking internally within the company.
Yep.
And recognize that this bad boss, stay on their good side. And then quietly, like this whole term, like it was very trendy for a while, like quiet quitting.
Yeah.
I really like that, but really what quiet quitting is just doing your job to the best of your ability. And then it's just like just doing your job and then doing everything else to get out of it.
Yeah.
So do your job well quietly, and then you already know, you've already disengaged. You're putting these tactics into place to make your current situation tolerable and malleable, and then job hop quietly from there. So I think there's a lot of times people like the friction of like, and my boss was bad and this and great. However, there's like I'm a big believer of like there's huge power in silence. There's huge like it's always the quiet ones. It's always the quiet ones. So I think it's like finding ways to, like, if you have a bad boss, document it, be kind, get your ducks in a row quietly, and then it's always fun to leave in like a huff, but it's very powerful to leave on your own terms.
Yeah, and I will say this, as much as I like want to, I've left certain companies where I wanted to light the match.
Yeah, for certain.
If you will.
And film it and like
film it, talk about it. I will say I've, despite some of my volatile personality, I have not done that.
Yeah.
I have come as close to it as humanly possible of burning a bridge, but I have not officially burned any bridges, and I'm an advocate to not burn bridges. I forgot where I was going with that, but all of that being said, I'm curious to get your take, just given your background, not necessarily related to job hopping, but adjacent. Because we talk a lot about that hiring budgets are more than
retention budgets.
Retention budgets
for certain.
What's your take on? And should you just go get another offer to get your raise? Is there any value in asking for the raise without getting another offer?
Yeah, okay. So I think there are a couple pieces in that. One, I think you should always ask for the raise. You should always ask, but
right. Fine.
Absolutely always ask for the raise. However, to do it effectively, ask for it with evidence to back it up. So this is always like making sure that you're documenting your successes and your wins. So I always keep a copy of my resume like on my desktop.
Yeah.
And anytime I do something, or like I spearheaded a project, or I was put on a panel or whatever, I'll just put it on there. And then when it's time to like really update my resume, I'll just have all that information already there instead of like racking my brain, right? And so when it comes to asking for a raise, the same kind of thing. You can be like, okay, I'm going to ask for this raise, do some research on like what your counterparts are making, and then say, hey, during your performance review, you can frame it as like, hey, I would really like to be at this salary level by this date. I feel like this is supported because I've done this, 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 and this. How can we work together to get me to this level by this date? And then that opens a conversation from a collaborative spirit, but also it puts a very clear action plan that you can hold your manager accountable to. And also gives you like a good map and an outline for yourself to reach that goal. If you do that, like, it's a nice one, it's a roadmap. Two, it's self-protection, because you're like, well, you told me.
Yeah.
And then whatever. And then if not, it gives you a reason to jump ship. So I think it's always good. Always ask, but make sure to ask with intention.
Yeah.
And ask with support and evidence behind it. And then if the other piece of like jumping to get a higher salary, if you feel like let's say you like your company and you're doing well, but the money just isn't there. Yeah. In my mind, in my heart, you got to go. Yeah. Because you got to, whatever your relationship status is, we're in New York. Like, for me, I'm like a young, like I'm, You're young. I'm young. I'm 42, 43. Like, single woman in New York City, I have to make that money. And like, I loved working in higher ed, and I was really good at it. I was a really good career coach and counselor, but I wasn't making that money. And so I had to make a jump. I ended up almost doubling my salary when I went back to corporate, and now in this new role, I had another significant pay raise, and I feel like I was able to do that, but with support, time, effort. I was documenting all my things. I was making intentional jumps. So I'm a big proponent of job hopping, but doing it like intentionally with like evidence and not as much out of emotion. I used to do a lot of emotional shit in my 20s, and it made me like, I feel like I wasted 10 years of my professional growth being like neck snappy and like everything was emotion based. And looking back on it, I was kind of an asshole and I wasn't a great employee. And then when I got my head out of my ass and like started doing things methodically, intentionally, my career got better, my relationships got better. And so I think another piece that like we can talk about as well is like how to take emotion out of the work. And like, finally, and now I'm in my 40s. I think it took me like when I was like 35, 36.
Oh, so I'm like, I'm coming up on it.
You're coming up on it.
Because I haven't. Like, I still get really emotional.
Yeah, I mean, it's fine to get emotional with work because, again, it's like part of our identity. But for me, I used to like think for a long time that like everybody because I'm a friendly person, that everybody at work was meant to be your friend or your second family and like all that sort of shit. Yeah. And I was like, oh my God, like all relationships are like personal and intertwined, and that is not true, but it doesn't mean those relationships aren't valuable. Yeah. But when I started separating work from self, and comedy is like a big part of this, when I started getting like actual hobbies that were not swiping on apps and going out to dinner like with my friends and bitching about how expensive things were, when I started doing stuff that was like fulfilling me emotionally, creatively, like when I started working out, taking care of myself legitimately, I started performing better at work because I realized, I had this whole separate life that wasn't tied into this money, and that's all it was like money. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So I'm 100% with you. There was a point in time, especially in my 20s, and I think this is common, is work becomes your life. Mm-hmm. And
your social circle.
It's your social circle. Mm-hmm. And I've met people who have I'm one of those people who I've made a lot of friends that I've worked with. Yeah. Like, and they are in my life. They are my adult friends. We hang out. We go on vacations. Mm-hmm. My literal best friend right now, we met at work. Yeah. Like, and she's my ride or die. Yeah. And it is it is a social, but it doesn't have to be, especially if you have, like, if you have that other support outside of work, mm-hmm. It really doesn't have to be. You can go in, be pleasant, be work friends, and then leave, call it a day. But what's interesting in all of that, and like taking the emotion out of it, and job hopping for the sake of money is, I'll admit, it's a lot of why I did it.
Hell yeah.
A lot of why I did it.
Absolutely.
But one thing I will say that now reflecting back is sometimes I would make more money, but I didn't go for, I'm in a role that I wasn't going to be challenged in. So that's also why almost immediately I was like, oh, I'm over this.
Sure.
And I think that a lot of times when people are applying for jobs, they're like, how many of these boxes do I check off? I'm like, I feel like you got to just be like 60% there. There's got to be like some room for stretch and growth. And and that area of stretch and growth, you got to talk about, like, just build it into your narrative when you're interviewing on, like, the experience you have that can get you there, even though you may not have it directly.
We talk about that all the time, or like we did, but even now, like when I take like private clients for career coaching, you're exactly right. When we were talking about the jobs that will be fulfilling to you.
Yeah.
And this also goes into imposter syndrome. So if any women are out there who are listening to this.
My life.
Yeah. You should always be applying for jobs, exactly what you said, that you meet 65 to 70% of the qualifications. A little less, fine. A little more, fine. But you should never be applying for a role that you have 100% of the qualifications, because, like, what is that?
No, then you are going to be
bored.
Yeah.
And then you shouldn't be applying for jobs that you have 10% of the qualifications, because you're just not quite there yet.
Yeah.
65 to 75 is like 60 to 70 is like the sweet spot. Take that loosely, but you want to have a good base, but room to stretch and grow. And I think that's a good metric around finding some job satisfaction. So you can, if the goal is to like stay in a role for a couple years and grow internally, that's a really good metric.
I'm curious your take on this, especially like with New York, how they have to post salaries.
God, I fucking love it.
In job descriptions. But hold on. Mm-hmm. Because I'm queen of, you posted that? Well, we're going to see if you can go higher than that. That's my life. That being said, because I do that, like I've done that and I do that. But anytime I have gone outside of that range, I've noticed I always get the bare minimum of merit because there are floors for roles.
Yeah.
So if you come in at the highest end, especially that next year, you're not, usually you have to be at a company, correct me if I'm wrong, at least 18 months to be considered for a promotion.
That it depends on the company.
Depends on the company. Yeah, but like,
depends on the company.
And I'm all about breaking those rules too. But anyways, but either way, like so you can't, if you're already at a ceiling, if they're what is the question? The question is how, I feel like what I'm noticing, especially as I'm interviewing people, everybody's coming in at the high end of the range.
Sure.
Because they see it and it's posted.
Yeah.
Is that strategically the right move?
So I think what's really nice about pay transparency when it's done right, because when you post something from like that, when it says it's like, oh, there's salary between 50 grand and 600 grand. That's
well, yeah, and I hate that too.
But when it's like legitimate, let's say they have a posting between like, 150 to 210. Like that's a legitimate based on whatever. I would take that as like, okay, this is the range that they have to play with.
Yep.
Typically from a hiring standpoint, they're going to want to bring somebody in the middle of that range. Like, so if it's 150 to 210, they're probably like a good sweet spot for that is somebody who's like at 175.
I was going to say 180, yeah.
175, 180. Because like same idea of like has ability to stretch, has ability to grow. They're bringing somebody in at 210 who's already done that job with their eyes closed.
Yep.
And they don't even want to hire that. So I would, but it's not saying that you can't do that. Like in my last role, it was really nice. And I came in at like the mid to the top of the range, and then I negotiated and they brought me in at like top range. But I had done something very, very similar, like in the previous, and it came with evidence and all that stuff. However, I'm curious to know if like when like raises and promotions become available in the next year or so, if because I've maxed out, like it'll take me a while to like stretch, but I'm okay with that because they brought me in quite high.
Yeah.
So my thought is when you're looking at, and tell me if I'm answering this to the way you're envisioning it.
Sure.
When you're seeing a range, always like aim for the middle to the upper. Like
Consider where you're at too, though.
Yeah, consider. Yeah.
How? So I didn't mean to cut you off.
No. Like, let's put a. Give me an example of like a Jane Doe.
Mm-hmm.
Like she's applying for this job. She has this. There's a job that's being.
She's
posted.
at 140 right now.
Perfect. And there's a role that's being posted between 150 and 210.
Yep.
Good. That bitch should go for 175.
Agreed.
That's what she should go for. She's not quite at 210, but she's maxed out at her current role because she's doing well and she's ready to job hop because she's coming at it with like evidence. She's good. She's ready to go. Yeah, come in at 175. Come in at 180. Saying when you're negotiating that salary, you can say like, I'm looking for a range between 175 and 190. And if they come in and say, hold on one second.
Yeah.
I'm getting so worked up about this. Pardon me.
You're okay.
Can we, hold on.
Yeah. I can cut it.
Cut it for a second. Hold on one second. Get out of water. All right. So we're back.
Yeah.
Thanks. So if she's at like 140 right now, and she sees something that's posted for a range between 150 and 210, aim for the middle of it. She should give herself a healthy raise. She knows that she's at that level. And additionally, like, levels are kind of arbitrary. They're based on what budgets are, what the industry is, all this stuff. Like, if you're working a nonprofit, you might be making $75,000 a year with a master's degree, going for your PhD, where the same qualifications at a different company that's just a for-profit would yield you triple that, right?
100%.
So taking all these things into consideration, if somebody's at 140 and they're applying for something in that range, go for the middle to the above. It's not, I think money is not an indicator of skill. I mean, there's value to it, but money is not necessarily equal in terms of indicator of skill for the actual role. Like, from industry to industry, the same skill set can command wildly different salaries just based on what the company is.
Yeah, no, that's super valid and fair. And I'll admit when I'm always going over whatever, but usually, but I joke and I say that, but one of the things that I think is worth pointing out and that I truthfully think about is I always say go in mid-high, depending on where you're starting at. Like, because if what you're to go in mid-high so that there is some room for growth, though, but still go higher than you probably. I always, especially if you're a woman, and this is fucked up to say, go in 10% higher than you initially instinctually were going to do, because I think a lot of times we undervalue ourselves. But even though I've been told, side note, my company, when I got hired, you can opt in to a third party to tell you how you track from like a men to women ratio of your salary, like just so you know what range you're in and how like equal paying they are.
That's interesting.
Which I was like, yeah, fuck it, whatever. Like, it costs me money, right?
Right.
And I was very happy and proud to say I'm over, regardless of gender. I was like,
Yeah.
oh, great. But I'm like, oh, fuck, I'm overpaid. You're also quick to get cut, especially once you get to leadership.
Sure.
If you're overpaid, you're quick to get cut. All of that being said, one of the things I do try to tell people, especially if you're trying, like, you like the company, you think you want to be there, you want to stay there for 2-3 years, go in at a place that you will be comfortable and meet your needs of bills and everything like that. Because like right now, if you're living paycheck to paycheck and you want to go somewhere so that you're not living paycheck to paycheck, take that into account, bake in that fluff, because merits are never amazing, raises are never amazing. So you but I also haven't been anywhere more than 2 years, so I don't know what it's like to be there for year 3 and beyond.
Sure.
But in my mind, I mean, if I'm consistently just getting these 3%, I'm like, I would never stay, right?
Yeah.
Like, so go in at a range that's gonna then you think you can be comfortable for the next couple of years.
Definitely. And I think also, like, to go back to that range of if she's at, 140 and that range is 150 to 210, if she can warrant it and she has the skills, like, say, like, hey, I'm really looking for a range of, like, 180 to 220.
Yeah.
And you can say that if you feel like it's not, like, if you have the skills to back it up, you're going to be able to hit the ground running in the role. Like, go, like, your worth. You know 100%. Your value. I think also something that I want to highlight just about money and, like, we live in large urban cities that are expensive.
Oh, it's city-based, people.
Yeah,
like,
it's all
it's
city-based.
Very city-based. If you are in middle America.
But just know, and I didn't know this, it's not that you're bad at your job. You're just not making a lot of money right now, and so that's why everything feels tight.
Yep.
Like, it wasn't until the past maybe, like, handful of years where I finally felt, like, financially, knock on wood, comfortable, where I could just do things to advance myself as opposed to just, like, making my rent, making my whatever. And I used to beat myself up about that so much, about, like, oh my God, I'm stupid, I'm not good at my job, I'm not making enough money, like, everything feels tight, the way I'm living is, like, so shitty. But sometimes it's just you're not making enough money yet for where you want to live.
Yeah.
And you just, instead of beating yourself up, you just have to eat it for a little bit and also put in the time and the effort and, like, to job hop appropriately to get. So sometimes it's not a you problem. Sometimes it's just a money problem.
Yep.
And so that's just a little gift for anybody who's listening. Like, it's not 99% of the time, it's not you. Shit's just real expensive.
Yeah. And inflation is real.
And inflation is so real. Like, oh my God, it was so funny. I was at Trader Joe's the other day, and they had the eggs that were like $2.99 and the shell was clear. Yeah. And then they had these, like, high-end organic eggs that were $7.99. $7.99 for eggs?
Yeah.
Is you crazy? Like, and it was totally packed.
Yep.
So that's insane to me. Like, $7.99 for eggs. But all of this is to say, like, a lot of times we're just not making enough money for the cost of living where we are. And that could, like, go into different conversations.
Yeah, and that's, I feel like it's a whole other topic.
That's like, why do we live in New York? Yeah, because we do. Because we do. You know what? Because we do. And moving is expensive, too. So there's...
It's even more expensive here. You can't even justify the move. Anyways, that's neither here nor there. I want to thank you so much, Adi, for being here. Appreciate all your feedback and insight. And hopefully, listeners, you like, subscribe, comment, and we'll definitely have Adi back talking more career, more life, more.
Thank you for having me. One final thought before I go. My best friend Lisa we have known each other. We met on the first day of kindergarten.
Okay.
And we are now almost 43. And she is a nurse anesthetist, and she is making bank. So she's basically like an anesthesiologist. But something her grandpa always told her was GTM, and it's get that money. And so every time we get a raise, every time, like, she's now a teaching professor in addition to being a nurse, and that's a big pay bump. We tell each other, and we tell each other without jealousy.
Oh, 100.
And she's like, girl, I got a raise. And I'm like, GTM. Or I'm like, hey, I got a new job, and it came with this sort of raise, and I get these stock options. She's like, GTM. So don't be afraid to GTM. Don't be afraid. Find your good circle of women who are supportive of your success.
Oh, yeah.
Because it will take you so far, and just know you're worth it.
With that, GTM. Get that money. All right. Thank you guys so much.
Thanks so much, Julie.
Bye.
Bye.